Well, the US President-elect Donald Trump has warned companies of consequences if they leave the United States. And he made the threat while visiting a factory in Indiana and before kicking off his tour to say thank you to the Midwest. Arabella Munro reports.
For Donald Trump, visiting this factory stands as proof he'll keep the promises he made during his campaign. He says he's stopped 1,000 jobs at this Indiana air conditioner plant going to Mexico.
But I called Greg and I said, it's really important. We have to do something because you have a lot of people leaving. And you have to understand we can't allow this to happen anymore with our country.
It's an early win for the president-elect, but taking a closer look, the cracks appear. Indiana had to give Carrier a $7 million tax break to get it to keep the jobs in the state, and the company's still planning to close a nearby factory and move 1,300 jobs to Mexico. And for some, it's not enough. Bernie Sanders wrote in the Washington Post, "It's not good enough to save some of these jobs. Trump made a promise that he would save all of these jobs, and we cannot rest until an ironclad contract is signed to ensure that all of these workers are able to continue working in Indiana without having their pay or benefits slashed." Trump hopes this will be seen as a model for future deals. But given that his Vice President-elect, Mike Pence, is the governor of Indiana, it might not be as easy in other states.
Companies are not going to leave the United States anymore without consequences. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Trump hasn't said how he'll stop those businesses leaving. The United States has 5 million fewer jobs in manufacturing than it did in 2000. But during his campaign, he did speak of imposing a 35% tariff on goods made by American manufacturers that have moved jobs offshore. Trump also kicked off a tour of rallies thanking voters for helping elect him.
The era of economic surrender is over. We're going to fight for every last American job. It's time to remove the rust from the Rust Belt.
A message keeping his key supporter base happy.
He is truly draining the swamp, as he says. He's off to a good start there. He's already helping to keep jobs in America, and we're going to see more and more of that. We need to bring manufacturing back to the country.
Trump's triumphant rhetoric continues. But when he takes office in January, he'll have to work hard to fulfill those promises. And that could mean giving in to more businesses demanding tax breaks to keep jobs in America. Arabella Munro, TRT World.
And Max Wolff is a market strategist at 55 Capital. He joins us now from New York. I love the background, Max. Trump Tower. Couldn't have asked for more. Let me ask you something, Max. There's a reason why these companies want to move abroad. It's cheaper labor, it's cheaper real estate and so on. If he keeps them, change them to the United States, isn't there a danger they start to go bust?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think he can or will, right? So press conferences are exciting and it's always nice to see any jobs be saved. But the truth is, if it takes the president a couple of weeks and it takes $7 million plus, because the process was pretty opaque, so we don't know all the details, then it's not practical or desirable to try to do this on every single individual private employment decision. And the truth is, we should add to our list of reasons that employment is down in the US, first and foremost, the evolution of new technologies, and secondarily, the fact that the world's base of consumer demand is increasingly outside the United States with the emerging middle class all over the world. And just like the American president wants jobs here, turns out every other president wants jobs there too. And if the growth in demand isn't here and the technology is pushing for fewer labor inputs, I don't think you can really stand in the way of the progress of time and the evolution of the global economic situation for all that long or all that successfully.
Yeah, the evolution, that's a key word, Max, the evolution of the global economy. The fact is, you know, the competitive advantage in the United States isn't cheap labor, isn't cheap real estate, is it? But what about the consequences? What does he mean by that? And would he even have a legal foot to stand on?
So it's not 100% clear. I mean, I think part of what we're trying to see, and part of what the benefit may be of the sort of Indiana press release, which kind of this is a little bit more of a publicity thing than a macroeconomic thing, and we're only left to hope that everyone understands that. But I mean, the idea here is that you can use the bully pulpit, you can use the public's anger, and much of that anger is rightful about the employment circumstance, and you can sort of try to say, hey, companies, if you don't do the more patriotic employment thing, there might be a PR cost and there might be some wrangling, and you might have to deal with the president keeping his popularity up with a PR stunt that makes life difficult. And on the margin, you may leave some more jobs here. But the $7 million and the free press release and whatever else went on here, still true that at least 55% of the jobs being discussed look like they left anyway. So I don't think this is a real industrial policy. I think it's a good shot across the bow. It'll certainly be a crowd pleaser to his more avid fans. And it's an interesting moment. I don't think it's an industrial program for a country of 330 million people, though.
So it's more of a populist measure, perhaps, a good PR stunt. These tax breaks, can the country really afford them? He's going to go on a spending spree across infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't afford not to have a functioning infrastructure. So I would separate out special deals for individual companies, which do sort of suggest favoritism and picking winners, which is something that the United States has spent the last 70 years lecturing the world that markets should do, not governments. But that notwithstanding, people have a tendency to forget that when you puke back up $7 million worth of taxes, those are dollars that don't go to employ someone like a school teacher or a police officer or a firefighter or a nurse or a surveyor or the economic development people who are designed and should be out there attracting new jobs that can compete and do have a permanent home in Indiana or the other locations. Right. And I just think that this is a little bit risky, also because other governments will follow suit if it looks successful.
And that's the problem with economics, Max. It's always take some from here and give some to there. It's a delicate balancing act.